some time today. As mentioned, I'm a senior consultant here with Eos Group and sit on the Cortex product development team and also lead some of our client implementations. This is really our first in a series of introductory webinar tracks, each focusing on a different capability and content. So this being a blue track, benchmarking, we'll start out with that and notify you of more on the way. So appreciate your attention. A little background on Eos Group. We've been in business for over 25 years. It's a solution and services company. We work primarily with the AEC and owner market and focus extensively on the pre-construction benchmarking and cost estimating space. We enjoy, as you can see, a large share of the ENR top 400 clients, and with over 2,000 successful implementations, numerous commercial and custom software solutions, and a team of experienced software developers and consultants, our goal is to empower our clients and their users. Today, we will be presenting Eos Cortex project history. It's a cloud-based solution supporting benchmarking, conceptual estimating, and trend analysis. Project history can be hosted by Eos or installed on-premise behind your firewall. And it runs on a browser, so it's pretty easy to use. Project history can store virtually any data source and has different modules for supporting role-based capabilities. In order to get a few common questions out of the way, I thought it would be important to highlight what Eos and project history are not. Project history is not a comprehensive business intelligence platform. It's designed to support specific workflows on a configurable database platform. Specific output, however, is designed to be consumed by BI tools. We get that question quite a bit, so we do have a way for you to export data and utilize it in those solutions. It also will be a future webinar topic. We do not provide a benchmarking repository of anonymized or real project history. It's your data that gets published to the system and used that way. So neither is it a detailed estimating system. We do represent partner solutions and implementation services. Similar to that, it is not a cost estimate content database or a detailed commodity database. We do provide our own pedigree of knowledge bases, as well as represent partners for their content. And those are typically used by those detailed estimating systems. And lastly, we are not economists, nor do we provide market indices. Project history can store, use, and maintain them, but we do not provide that content. Okay, so let's recap project history's 3 major workflows, just to kind of get that outlined here. Benchmarking, conceptual estimating, and trend analysis. Benchmarking and conceptual estimating are well-known concepts, I'm sure, amongst the group here. Trend analysis is really focusing on standardizing a cost element library across your project database. So that allows you to support cost estimating system database calibration. In essence, you're publishing these projects to a system already. Those typically represent some flavor of final go-to market and or as-built data. So we've built a tool that hopefully can let you use that data to ensure your cost estimates going forward are in line with your history. Today's focus is on benchmarking. Certainly these different capabilities are very interrelated and use the same data. However, in a single database, we're going to take a look at some of the reasons for benchmarking, and these are kind of some of my favorites. You know, some of them are pretty boilerplate, but certainly it's important to point out that those reasons range from comparative best practices. How does that new estimate or project stack up against your history? Through probably one of my favorites, which is to question bias in estimates. So using that history that's probably produced or conditioned and approved by various others in your organization can let an individual quickly see how that estimate stacks up against that standard. Last slide I'm going to show you is a little bit of the future of the Cortex platform. So project history is the first solution out of that platform, released about 2 years ago. And we're in development now with a late 2020 target for our conceptual estimating solution, Budget Builder. And Budget Builder is designed to several project cost modeling methodologies for early stage screening, class 5 type estimates, as well as down to probably a schematic or class 4 level, depending on your data. Out on the horizon is Advisor, positioned as our machine learning solution. More to come on that as we dig in and roll up our sleeves, but in fact, even project history has a simple yet configurable, quote unquote, similar project algorithm feature that you can build, and we'll be looking at some of that today. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started with the presentation. On your screen, you should see the project history home screen. It's a personalized home page. And as you can see, my name is displayed. There is a area for menus and icons that will take you to different areas of the system, as well as a keyword search by projects, cost elements, detailed line items, and portfolios. We provide you with a clipboard and also a favorites area for placing projects for easy access throughout the system. On the main part of the page, you're going to see projects that were recently viewed by you, as well as recently published, perhaps some portfolios or saved collections of projects that you've been working with, as well as, again, pointing out to you some similar projects that you've been viewing in the past. While projects throughout the entire database can be found with a classification structure, or keyword search, as I mentioned, the focus today is on benchmarking, and that's against a standard. So in this case, if I were to paint a scenario, I'd like to compare perhaps a schematic design phase hotel tower component, and that's an estimate against a saved set of similar projects. In order to do that, I have to get the project into the system. Cortex has an import capability that allows you to simply go out, select a project. As you can see, that's an Excel file. The system will, upon importing that project, validate it to make sure that A, there are no errors, and B, that it conforms with your standards. So it's a two-step process of bringing it in and then providing you status, warnings, errors, so that you can fix the problems if there are, and ultimately get that project in. So now I have a new W Hotels Tower project sitting in the system ready for me to consume. So let's go back to the home page. Give it a quick refresh here. And in that bar that says recently published, we should see our new W Hotels Tower. Hovering over that icon shows me some high-level information about the project. Clicking on it shows me that project in a single project view. A little bit about the page and the way it's built probably helped. So here on the left, you can see there's a series of tabs, and the first one of those is attributes. And these attributes are metadata of the project. They can be cost or non-cost. Groupings allow you to organize them in a meaningful way here on this page. There's also an information panel, and this information panel contains, again, some of that high-level information you might have seen on the tile, as well as a simple pie chart reference to some similar projects. The KPI view is a configurable page. Basically, all these are configurable, but a configurable page where you can establish various saved views of meaningful key performance indicator values that you get to build. So some of that information might be ratios or unit costs. Regardless, you can store as many or as few as you like. You can organize them so they can be easily accessed and isolated and viewed in context of the project. The cost elements view allows you to essentially look at your cost structures all the way down to some very, very granular type of information, and you can support more than one cost structure. So that could be industry standards like uniformat or master format, or your own internal discipline codes or chart of accounts. This grid is expandable and collapsible, both globally, as well as being able to drill down into the terminal levels using these arrows next to each title. Links. Links are essentially attachments. You can attach files. You can establish UNC paths or paths to your network shares. So there might be files or information that you'd like associated with the project there. And you can also set up links. So links could be to websites, SharePoint, OneDrive, any kind of document control systems that are accessible either out there in the public or behind your firewall. There's also a mapping feature. Want to see where the project is on a map? Will allow you to do that, not just on a single project, but you'll see that in some other views as well. Well, this is my new project. It's a tower that has an estimate associated with it at essentially a schematic level, planned to be built in October of 2021 in San Diego. So I want to use this later for some of my benchmarking purposes. And so I want to go ahead and add this to my clipboard. As you can see, I've got a clipboard icon here in the upper right. There's 9 of these in the clipboard already, and I'll add this and make that 10. So how do I find my standard? Well, one way is to use portfolios, and portfolios can be accessed using this icon. And here you can see I've got a series of portfolios. One that I positioned here up at the top so I can find it is my benchmark set for hotel towers that represent a moderate to high complexity. By selecting this, a grid is displayed, and this is basically a collection of projects. And this is the same kind of view that you'll get whether you choose projects from the classification system or you search for projects up here in the keyword search. Either way, it's a collection. There are different ways to look at the collection. Grids are nice, obviously, for seeing a lot of data, if there's density of data. I can also look at a tile view. Again, hovering over, you get to see the tile information, just really up to you. I like working in the tile view. If I do need to see some of that pretty marketing information here, I can turn on that same information panel you saw in the single view and hit there to the right. As I cycle through the projects, those will all reflect here in the project information pane. The columns are configurable. These are essentially the attributes you saw. You can sort them, you can move them around, you can even name and save views so that they're easy to get at, and you can have a company standard or personal standard. The mapping feature works from here as well. So as you can see, now I have more than one pin in place. 2 of these projects are in Vegas, so they're right on top of each other, but that's accessible for multiple projects, not just a single project. In order to benchmark my new estimate against these projects, I'm going to use Project History's Compare view. To get into Compare, I'm going to select all of the projects and click this icon. Project History will organize these as columns, and the rows being, depending on the view you're looking at, the various bits of information. Here I'm looking at attributes. I can expand and collapse those so I can isolate on financial information, quantity information, and so forth, representing the project. Statistical columns are available, and so I can show, for example, high, average, baseline information, as well as a low, representing these. Statistical columns are easy to turn on and off. You can drag them in. You've also got median, standard deviation, total, and so forth. Same thing with KPIs. They will basically snap to the statistical columns that I've chosen. So here again, expandable, collapsible, just look at the information I'm interested in, and cost elements is no different. With cost elements, you have actually more data that you can display. As you can see, of the 3 projects I'm showing here, each project has 2 columns. In this case, I've decided to show unit cost information. In this column, I have the grand total of the project divided by the overall project size, or gross square footage. Because these are hotels and cost per room or cost per unit is an important metric for me, I also turned on grand total per secondary size, which in the case of hotels would be a unit. Likewise, the statistical columns also reflect those columns. And as I drill down through the cost structures, each one of those levels will show those statistical data and information. Data density is a little bit more of an issue on this page, so we give you the ability to create smaller icons, larger icons, or even turn the pictures off altogether. Now, these projects were built in different places for the most part, certainly at different times, and it'll be important for me to normalize this information to reflect my new estimate. Project History's normalization system can, among others, normalize the project to location and a date. Project History will represent the calculated overall value and let you apply those to the comparison. Once applied, visually will let you indicate, as you navigate around the system and look at different views, how those projects were normalized. So I've set the stage for my benchmarking exercise, and now I want to go ahead and bring in that new estimate. By displaying the clipboard, we can see that I've got my W Hotels tower in there, and by dragging it down to the left side of this vertical hard line, it will baseline the project for me. Now with that, you get a bunch of new statistical information. These first 2 columns are the average of the unit cost by project size and the average of the unit cost by the number of rooms in the tower. Those do not include my baseline. Those include just the comparator set. However, these 2 statistical columns give me the relationship of my baseline project to the comparator set's average, and very quickly see some great information about how closely that project reflects the standard. And again, as I drill down through the cost structures, you can see that I get different percentages all the way through. Again, data density is a big deal, and that's why we provided some charting. Probably one of the most powerful charts that visually lets you see the differences very clearly is the high-low chart. The high-low chart lets you choose any sort of data point supported by your configuration, and it's going to show you the low and the high in the range of the 3, in this case, the 3 comparator projects. It will also show you the average and where my baseline project sits in relationship to that average. Certainly in the markups and indirects cost section, I'm at the high end, but I'm not completely out of range. Same thing in the engineering and construction management, but as a schematic, it's got a lot of contingency. So it might make sense that that icon is a long way out of the range. Let's look at the direct costs. Direct costs may give me a little bit better idea of how this actually stacks up. Are there problems in the design? Why are there no shell costs? Why is the site work so far out of range, and so forth? So very quickly, I can see where the problems may exist, how I need to address those, who I need to talk to. That's a little bit harder to do when you're wading through many, many rows of detail in the cost element structure. Other charts available to you look a little different in this view. For example, I can choose multiple data elements. In this case, I've chosen labor costs, material costs, markup costs, subcontract costs. And the baseline project sits first, but it's very easy for me to see what that relationship is to the other projects in the comparator set. We provide you with a 100% bar, allowing you to see the proportional ratio of those costs across the projects, and a pie chart where you can select any single data point, allowing you to understand more about relationships. Any of these views can be exported to Excel for more offline analysis, presentation. Just about every view you see in here has this icon that allows you to export, and I can export just this view, or I can export all compare views, which means I'll get attributes, any of the KPI views I showed you, as well as the cost element view. Once in Excel, you'll find that we provided some formatting. Not only are we going to show you and carry over that normalization rules that we've set on the project, but we're also going to bring some icons and some pictures so that this presents nice as any kind of output. In all the views, if there are summary levels, whether those be the groupings of the attributes, or in the case of the cost elements, here I have a 4-level structure. We'll provide you with the Excel groupings so that those are easy to navigate around and consume. So that's one standard. Save a collection, call it your gold standard for a certain type of project, easily import new information and baseline it against that collection. As I mentioned in my slideshow, there also is the concept of similar projects. Similar projects might be a way that you could develop your standard. So for example, if I am looking at an office building and project history has suggested that there are 10 projects in the system that are similar to this one, by selecting those similar projects, I get a collection. And the important part here is that if you have confidence in your data, you can trust the system to provide recommendations as your standard. Now, 10 additional projects may be too many to compare against. You may want to filter this set down to something more meaningful. So project history has the ability to come in and let you say, well, I'm looking for projects that have a composite exterior skin type or are of a certain range in a project size. So filtering by some of those attributes that you get to define is a very fast way of getting to a collection. Now that we're here, same workflow, pick the projects, go to compare, and you are on your way. That concludes the presentation for today, and I very much appreciate your attention and your time. And so I will turn it back over to Madeline for questions.
Thank you, Tony. We did have some questions pop up. One was asking if you can show the Excel import template.
Sure. The Excel import template is actually snapped to by the system. Here's one that's filled out already. And by snap to, I simply mean that it will follow the configuration. So as you configure the system or as you make changes to the system, the publishing template is consumed from within the browser. So you don't have to maintain it on your file server and keep it up to date every time you decide to say, it's not job type, it's job types. And that's important because nobody wants to try to do that. You would be chasing your tail. And so the import templates are quite capable, and they will even support things like drop-down lists and drop-down lists for units of measure. So here I can fill in all or some of the project information. If any of these fields are required by you or the system, for example, project ID, we require. However, there might be fields that you want your estimators or project managers or whoever is publishing the project to enter because it's your company standard, such as the data source. So the project sheet lets you fill in all of that attribute type information. Again, we support that with expandable, collapsible groupings so that it's easy to use. The item sheet is a representation of flattened data. Here I'm showing very simple cost structures. You're going to have everything from quantities and costs to more specification type information if it applies. Cost elements also are provided with drop-down lists, so you can fill that out. Typically, our clients will condition their source data so that it matches this format. We also support automated publishing through various estimating systems as well. Anything you see in red here is typically a calculated field, or it's a field that's provided by the system, so you can't really override it. The remaining tabs are essentially places where you can place the thumbnails you saw in the information panel, other thumbnails, other images. If you do go multi-currency, which project history supports, it will also come through with project currency rates. They will they're pre-populated with what you save in the database, but if, for example, on a project by project basis, you needed to overwrite those, you could in the template.
Great, thank you. The next question we've gotten a couple inquiries on is, how much does Cortex cost?
Cortex is an enterprise solution. It's a server-based system using web services, and it has a modular approach. So my answer varies depending on what kinds of modules, how many licenses you need, whether those are concurrent or named, and your hosting strategy. Some clients are okay with Eos hosting, others want this behind their firewall. Necessarily, there are costs involved with deployment. We are also planning on releasing a small to mid-sized business solution. And this will be a different version of project history. And we expect that in the May to June timeframe. Please contact us. I'll be happy to talk to you or another sales associate and very quickly be able to lay out budgeting estimates for you.
Perfect. We had another question pop up, wondering if we have any process, refinery, or oil and gas project examples to show.
We do. Two things. I would encourage you to go to our website. We have videos, and some of those videos show our demonstration data around the process, oil and gas, industrial type of project suite. But without going into too much detail, I could come here to the project classification system. Here I have 20 projects in that general category. So if I were to select that node, I would get a collection of those kinds of projects. Here I have some transmission and distribution projects. I also could look at power plants, and those will all have different kinds of information. But in general, the user interface you saw will reflect those same kinds of pieces and parts of information. So here on the power plant, these are actually pretty large projects, thousands of detailed line items. And we've also built KPIs around those. So should you be interested, we're happy to show you a personal demonstration on a web meeting to go through that if you'd like.
Great, thank you. Next question, how do projects get imported?
Well, as I showed you in the presentation, there is a project import page. It's easily accessed just by going to that menu that's at the top of every one of Project History's pages and you would choose import projects. This option will bring you to this page. And it's here that you would select the file. In this case, I was demonstrating the sort of off-the-shelf Excel import capability. Now, if you have some sort of project controls, estimating platform, and so forth, I have different answers for you. For example, if you're a Sage estimating client, we have an automated publishing engine. Goes straight to Cortex. If you have some other type of system, it might be a two-step process. So if you're interested in discussing those options more or seeing those in a demonstration, again, please contact us. I'm not sure that answered the question. It could have been something more specific, but both what I showed, the import template, as well as the process of picking that file from this dialog is how you would import it.
Great. And the next one is, when are the future modules going to be available?
So the budget builder module is targeted for late 2020. Sorry, I can't be any more specific than that. Please keep checking in. And then as far as advisor, which would be our machine learning platform, I do not have an answer for you there yet. It will be next after we complete budget builder.
Great. The next one is ability to gather system costs. And then there's some examples.
Okay. You have some examples, Maddie?
No, sorry, they're in the Q&A box.
Oh, I see. You're going to make me work. Let's see here. Oh, okay. Dollars per square foot exterior closure, dollars square foot. Okay. So I would say that those would be positioned as probably, let's go back here to the KPIs. So if I were to select a project, let's go to the KPI view. And I've got key metrics. Maybe I go to key quantities. And here, let's assume that these were, cost per square foot of, exterior skin or something like that. So let's use substructure as an example. Here I have a total quantity. I have total labor hours and equipment hours, total amount, and then I can create things like this. How many cubic yards per man hour? What's the cost per cubic yard? So you get to build whatever these systems are, and from that represent the kind of data you want to show.
Great. The next question is, can the portfolios save normalization settings?
Portfolios can save normalization settings. If I select to, for example, go in here to that portfolio, and select to compare these, choose some sort of normalization setting. So assume I've gone through the process of finding these projects and vetting these projects and so forth. I can select them all now, save them as a portfolio. And you'll notice that this little yellow band comes across the top again, and it lets me I'll say it's factored, and I can now save that as a saved factor, set whatever one I want. And now that portfolio has been factored, and it'll also let you know that it's factored. So it'll essentially stay in that factored state And any projects I add to it as a result of a comparison, for example, will automatically get factored to.
Great. The next question is, what kind of similarity rules can you build?
Well, as I mentioned before, it's a fairly simple right now, but you can do multiple ones, and they basically come in two types. So the similarity rules of these attributes. And so, for example, if I create a very simple similarity rule that says, I would like the similarity rule to make sure that project history is recommending to me a similar project if it matches the foundation type. So if the attribute is a list type, then it must match in order to be considered similar. Conversely, I have a second type of similarity rule, and that is based on a numerical value. And with numerical values, you get two types of data types to represent that. One is going to be a range. So is it within 10%? And I can also weight that. So those are the two types of similarity rules you can build.
Great. Back to normalization. For normalization factors, ability to use multiple sources of time-placed adjusting.
So at a high level, the way we've built the factoring subsystem is that you can do either a single dimensional factor or a two-dimensional factor. If it's a two-dimensional factor, then the intersection of the dimensions needs to be a calculated value. So in essence, you will be able to fairly represent the relationship between two dimensions, whether those be location and time or project complexity and something else. So it can be brutally simple, or you can create quite a bit of complexity around the calculated value of the intersection between two dimensions. The examples we have here in our demonstration data are the simple ones, location and date. This is two-dimensional because both of these dimensions are listed under one heading. This productivity factor is a single-dimensional table. And you can build as many of these as you like and apply them throughout the settings, and they will compound on each other.
Thank you. I'm not seeing any other questions right now.
All right, well, again, I'd like to thank everybody for their time and let you go with the rest of your day, and look forward to seeing you next time.
And we will be following up with a recording for this webinar, and please feel free to reach out with any questions after.